So I'd like to introduce my next guest. And actually, Brett, it's a big welcome back. You're an alumni to St Mary's University. So to give you a little bit of an introduction, Brett's been involved within rugby for over 20 years now, working with Leinster, the Scottish national team, the RFU, youth squads. He's also been instrumental in developing performance analysis programs. So we're delighted to have him part of the guest panel, and Brett will be speaking to you today about developing strategy using performance analysis within rugby. So welcome back, Brett.
Thanks, Patrick. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Things going well?
They're very well, thank you. How are you?
Okay. I'm not too bad.
Good.
I'll tell you what, I'm just going to share this screen and we'll start. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. I've just knocked off my video because I have video embedded within the presentation, so hopefully it will come through. It did this morning anyway when we tried it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at developing strategy in rugby using performance analysis, so a bit more practical stuff involved in the presentation. Just my background, I did a sports science degree in St Mary's, so it is nice to be back. Thanks for having me. I've been involved heavily in senior teams in Leinster Rugby, Scottish Rugby and age grade teams in the RFU as analysts. However, after that career, I went into lecturing, so I went back into education. So in 2014, we set up with Professor Mike Hughes, Ireland's only Masters in Performance Analysis in the Institute of Technology in Carlow. And so we're running that now 6-7 years at this stage. We've had some really fantastic students come through that. I've probably learned more from those students than I probably did in the professional game. So they've been brilliant, and it's great to be educate future analysts. My role now is I probably moved more into coaching. So I'm coaching University College Dublin in the All Ireland League, and I also coach one of the age grade teams, or assistant coach in the age grade teams, the Leinster under 18s. I've also thrown in for my sins, gone back to college. So I'm also doing a PhD in looking at referee demands and decision making around the referee area. And for me, I really like the strategy part of analysis. One of the purposes of performance analysis is the analysis of strategy and tactics. And for me, it's a huge part of the game that I think that most analysts probably enjoyed that part the most. I certainly do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through this framework for developing strategy in rugby. I know there's a lot of detail on the screen, but I'm going to take you through these 8 stages as we go along. And I'm going to back it up through video. So I will go through these individually. So stage 1, knowledge of team opposition. Stage 2, observed behavior. Stage 3, repeated behavior. 4, behavioral considerations. Then we're into the thinking part of it. So confirm and enhance knowledge. 6, pre-planning. 7, formulate the plan into training. And then performance into confirm and reflect. I'm going to take you through, I'm picking my audience because I know I'm on to English audience. So we'll have a look at England really. So I'm going to take you back to February 2019. So England obviously had some good knowledge on the green team, on Ireland, as they went along. So they had knowledge of themselves, obviously, and then knowledge of the opposition. But this is what happened 12 months ago in the game. So England adopted a strategy that if they kicked behind Ireland would struggle when they get turned. And you can see that was the first try or the second try of the game. So they obviously had that strategy in place. Then later on, the second half, the strategy appeared again. So with that knowledge, they moved on. So we move on 12 months. With that knowledge, they saw the observed behavior of the defence of Ireland, and they saw it repeated. However, there are slight changes in it. So this is what Ireland presented in previous games in February 2020. So Ireland are adopting a 13-man frontline defence with 2 covering the backfield. So it's like a twin fullback system. However, they do leave this space between each of those players, between number 9 and number 15. They leave this middle space. Obviously, Scotland had a different tactic in place. But there is observed behaviour going on here, and it is repeated behaviour. Again, you can see the separation of the space as they go along. So what happens is they've got to think, the England team, players, coaches, analysts have got to think about the personnel involved. What was the game state of the particular game? So, for example, the clip I showed is actually the first 2 or 3 minutes of the game. The environment, so pitch, weather, all that sort of home and away issues, and as well as the tactical shifts of the opposition. So the tactical shifts would be the opposition also have a game plan going on here. What this has done is it has actually confirmed and enhanced the knowledge of the opposition. England have a much clearer idea, which will help with the pre-planning phase of strategy. In the pre-planning phase of strategy, they've got to look at personal strengths and weaknesses. We've seen over a 12-month period that the 2 players, Stockdale and Lamore, probably struggled with the ball in behind, especially along the ground. They've also got to look at their own use of talent. So England obviously have 2 fantastic kickers of the ball. They've used this talent to help with their strategy. Game state comes into it, so the clips I'm going to show you come from the first opening few minutes of the match. Environment, the weather will affect your strategy, and then obviously, if the strategy, you've got to be able to operate it within the rules of the game. So the brains trust kicks in. So the brains trust, obviously, coaching staff, analysts, attack coach, as well as the players. So they've come up with a plan. So this is what England came up with. So hopefully people can see this. So there is the green player there and the green player there. So that's the space that they were looking at. It is an interesting strategy. So what they decided to do was pull this man out of this hole in here. Then when I stop it, oh, sorry, it's clicked on. So you can see where the space is. You can see that the whole team is part of the strategy. That's the second row has decided he's going to be the one that's going to do the kick. So he's in there by accident. And as the game wears on, you'll see that the space keeps going. It's still there. So this is all done with opposition analysis, looking to see what the opposition do. Ireland struggling with that ball in behind again, and it equals those 7 points in the first part. Then when we move on to stage 8, all it is they're actually performing the strategy, and then all we're doing is just confirming that the strategy is correct, and they get an opportunity to reflect on it to see is it working. So this is later on in the game. Same space, same idea, and another 7 points for England. So to go through this strategy, this framework for developing strategy in rugby, I believe that this framework for developing strategy could be used in most other invasion sports. So we start with the knowledge of the opposition and the knowledge of the team. So each team will have a preconceived idea of what they're actually up against. Then by observing behavior, so in other words, watching the opposition, seeing these trends, measuring these trends, having a look at repeated behavior. For me, repeated behavior becomes a huge thing in that analysis. Just because as an analyst or a coach or a player, you see the opposition do one thing, doesn't mean it's concrete. So you've got to base your strategy around repeated behavior. Then there's the behavioral considerations. Does the opposition change with different personnel involved, different selections? Does it change with game state? Looking at a team that are losing by 20 points or a team winning by 20 points, they might be doing other things. And then there's the environment of the pitch, the weather. interesting. England have a pretty big dead ball line, so they could probably play those kicks a bit more. You wouldn't play those kicks for the Stade de France, for example, which is a shorter dead ball line. There is tactical shifts. You've got to remember that the opposition are in tactics as well. So they might have a plan for a particular game. So you're looking at them trying to develop that plan. All this has done is just confirmed and enhanced the knowledge of the team, of the players, of the coaching staff, of the analysts. Then we're into the thinking behind it. So there has to be a pre-planned stage. You can have all the best plans in the world as a coach, but unless you have the talent to use it to implement the plan, you're probably at nothing. It should be based around the strengths and weaknesses of the opposition. Obviously, we're back into game state environment and within the rules of the game. To formulate the plan, for me, it has to be between that group of people that I talked about. It has to be implemented through training. And then we've got to be able to do performance to confirm and reflect. And at the very end, I've written adapt, because we might see the opposition do something in a game and we might have a strategy to do it. But if they've adapted, have you got the ability to adapt as well? So to finish off, I just robbed a quote from Stephen Covey: "Make time for planning. Wars are won in the general's tent." And I think I'm under my 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Brett. It's fascinating to kind of get a different perspective upon opposition analysis processes in rugby compared to, Stuart's presentation within football. And it's great to kind of see some similarities, but also some additional aspects that you fed in there. And I think one thing you mentioned was that actually players are actively engaged within, your processes of developing that strategy. And as an analyst, kind of starting off, how do you go about getting players on board with your processes that you're trying to implement and actually engaging them within it from the beginning?
Yeah, I think I came from the environment when I started first. The coaches were very much heavily involved in the analysis, and it was probably the way I was taught, and was probably part of my education when working with the older generation of coaches. We're now in a newer age of where it's a lot more to do with player empowerment, and it's probably started slow, that process. So I think tactical decision-making groups is probably a good way of introducing as analysis, getting individual players to report back on certain aspects of the game, whether it be give the player, here's the restarts, tell us about the opposition, present to the rest of the team. And I see a lot more of that begin to happen for analysts. And I think analysts have got to feel that their job is you're not getting redundant by this method. It's about getting the players on board and getting the players to start looking. Ultimately, we sit in the cheap seats. We sit up in the stand. We sit with a video monitor in front of us. They're the ones that have to do it. So I think it's got to be a shared understanding between coach, analyst and player, but most importantly the players. So that's the systems that we probably moved to over time.
Fascinating. And then a few kind of questions that have come in from the crowd. One from Eduardo, and it's more around kind of the time spent carrying out these processes and what softwares actually underpin them.
Okay, yeah. I thought it was interesting. One of the other speakers spoke about looking at 3 games or 5 games. I think we are probably pushing back to that 3 to 5 games in rugby union, especially because rugby kind of works on the 4-year cycles now, where coaches change as they go along. So, for example, Wales had a brand new coaching staff. So it was probably intriguing for all the analysts out there looking at Wales to see how they changed. Obviously, they had a head coach for a number of years, and there was big changes in what they did. So going into those games, they are going in blind. But I think it does take a long time. It takes a long time to code these. For me, we use sports code within the age grade programs in Leinster. In IT Carlo, we struggle with the software in terms of trying to keep abreast of everything that comes out. So we've moved heavily towards NAC sports, which is a fantastic product. And at the end of the day, I don't think it is about the software; it's about your processes of which you're using at the moment.
No, fantastic. And I hear you mention their sports code. I know Rex is a big developer within that, and he's now developed a new software, Angles, which is becoming a lot more prevalent within the field of analysis. So it's fantastic to see these companies, give us the tools to develop these strategies and to go about our processes. And kind of like another question that kind of links into that from Mark Vieira is, potentially for grassroots clubs, can they be doing the same sort of things, potentially without the financial implications that, big organisations actually have?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think it is very difficult. For example, looking at opposition analysis. I coach in the National League in Ireland, and one of the innovations they hit this year was they actually put all the footage onto Opta. And any team could have any access to whatever game they wanted within their league. And I thought it was a huge progression that Irish Rugby Union did for the game within Ireland. But for the grassroots, we're going back into beg, borrow and steal and talking and getting a relationship with other analysts and swapping tapes and talking about uploading onto WeTransfer or whatever way we're going to do it. But that's a big challenge for domestic games. I've seen domestic clubs throughout Ireland where they don't even have a camera. They wouldn't even video their games. So, but I think we're beginning to evolve. I think we're definitely getting better at that.
Oh, fantastic. And one final question. I know you'll enjoy this one, Brett. This is from Michael Ayres. So has the growth and impact of analysis in rugby made the game more predictable and therefore just a game of attrition and physical strength?
Oh, thanks, Michael. Has it? No, I don't think it has. I probably was on that wave of thinking a number of years ago. I think it has got at the higher level very, very tactical. And it has become a bit of a game of chess between coaches and players. I think the example is that area that I just showed where Ireland are defending a certain way and England have exploited ways around it. I think the key to all of this is how the players adapt on the field to the opposition strategy. And I think you've got to put that in practice where your players have got to have that ability to adapt and problem solve as the game is going on. I showed those clips are 30 minutes apart, I think. And you can see that Ireland unfortunately failed to adapt to that England strategy of kicking. But no, I don't. I think it's got more fascinating. And because I like that strategy part of the game as a coach. And I think it's definitely improved the game.
No, thank you very much, Brett. It definitely gives us, some additional perspective from a different sport about, how we embed performance analysis processes. So thank you very much for coming back to St. Mary's. Obviously,
thanks, guys. Thanks for having me back.
It's not in person, but it'd be great to catch up soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Brett. Now to introduce our next